Kia ora, good afternoon and welcome. I'm assuming that we've got everybody here we need. Just checking in particular that I've got all of the panel members online.
Yep. Well, yes, from me.
Yep, great. Okay, so if everybody's here, then that's great. Let's make a start. So just recap, particularly for the benefit of the people joining us online, anybody joining us online, this is a reconvened meeting of the hearings panel. The hearings panel has handled most of the issues that it needed to or wanted to. There are a number of outstanding matters being dealt with at this meeting that were referred to this meeting as adjournment of the previous deliberations meeting. So welcome everybody, and I'm not aware of any apologies for this meeting. Has anybody got any apologies that need to be raised? No apologies, thank you. All right, so if we turn to the agenda for the meeting, Craig has prepared a report, which is at the top of the agenda, in particular detailing the matters that were referred to us to this adjourned meeting, and that are detailed in paragraph 2 of his report. And just to refresh, they were the FDS matters relating to Wairaki South, Tara Road, and the staging of long-term development in the east and western corridors, and then the FDS industrial land study, potential future business area at Bell Road, Wairaki South. So updated issues and option papers have been provided. Nicola is going to present the information on the first matters, and then David will present on the industrial land study matter. But Craig, let's turn to your report first. We can take the report as read, but if you wanted to highlight any particular matters, or if there was anything you wanted to raise for discussion, or that you wanted to draw attention to.
Sorry about that. You can hear me now?
Yep, loud and clear. Thank you.
Chair. There's a couple of things to highlight. Just I'll come back to the resolution in a moment. The two issues and attachments 1 and 2, Nicola and David will present on those. In paragraphs 8 through 10, I just talked there about the previously considered issues and options papers, and those are there to be received. They're largely as presented at the previous deliberations meeting, but I highlighted a couple of items there under paragraph 9, some contextual information on Three Waters and electricity, and also the explanation to the live, learn, work, play vision. Two things that have been included in those papers that weren't considered on the 1st of March. Just wanted to highlight those. The other thing I wanted to talk about briefly is going to the recommendation, and that was recommendation 5, which relates to preparation of a decision document. There's a couple of things I wanted to potentially add to this. One is to be clear that there is work to be done on the chair's forward and executive summary of the strategy that could be referenced in 5, but also there needs to be a delegation to the chair to deal with any factual type changes or updates that might arise in wanting to make sure that the document's as current as possible. And that would be things, for example, references to the Spatial Planning Act and Natural Resources and Built Environment Act. I think we've picked up most of them. We want to make sure those kinds of things can be dealt with if we find other factually incorrect or out-of-date references. So we just need that delegation to do that added to the recommendation as well. So other than that, I'm happy to take any questions.
So just coming back to the matter that you've raised, Craig, there was some wording that I'd circulated to you and Nicola and not too long before this meeting, and I apologise for its lateness. I'd also been circulated to Emily. So an additional resolution authorises factual editorial changes and minor updates to be made to the strategy. We could actually add in there, including updates to the chair's foreword and preface, and provides a delegation to the independent chair to sign off on these. Now, if the hearings panel was happy for that to occur, that might be the easiest and neatest way to do that. I'm happy for that delegation to be provided, obviously to the whole panel, or for the whole panel to sign off by email, it would be if necessary, or for a delegation to be provided to myself and someone else. So there's a check and balance there, rather than me doing that on my own. Or if the panel was happy for me to have that delegation, obviously that keeps it very simple as well. But yeah, I was proposing some additional wording to pick up the point that Craig has just made, and to make sure that it's clear that we are allowing for those factual updates and necessary small changes, non-substantive changes to be made. All right, so if there's any discussion on that matter, or if anybody has got any other matters they want to raise by way of question or comment on Craig's report, now's the time to do that.
The managerial staff here have some questions, Andrew.
Yep, no, absolutely. Go ahead. Thank you.
So you've just proposed that new recommendation, which I feel like we've captured, but we wouldn't mind just reading it out for clarification for the panel, if that's okay.
Do you want me to read it to you again?
Well, I just note that what the wording you sent through, you added to it slightly by including the chair's forward. So I just wanted to an exec summary.
Okay, yeah, you read back to me what you've got, and I'll check that I'm happy with it, but then we also need to make sure the whole panel are comfortable with it as well.
Perfect. So number 6 would read, authorises factual editorial changes and minor updates to be made to the strategy, including updates to the chair's forward and executive summary as necessary, and provides a delegation to the independent chair to sign off on these.
Yep, that's good wording. I'm happy with that.
Perfect.
So just checking that panel members are comfortable, realising that's still in draft at the moment, and there may be other discussions that will occur throughout this meeting. Just checking that the panel are happy, at least in principle, for that resolution to be added to the resolutions that we'll come back to at the end of the meeting. Yep, so people are generally comfortable with that, and we'll obviously come back to it by confirmation along with other recommendations at the end. Great, thank you. Are there any other questions or matters that people want to raise in relation to Craig's report?
Andrew, can I just...
Absolutely, please do.
Yeah. Look, my apologies, but I've completely struggled with this. Maybe it's just my technological incompetence, but I really did struggle. So I wanted to thank Tracy and Nicola for helping me in terms of focusing on the appropriate sections. Can I just have confirmation that all we are really looking to decide today is the decisions around the FDS, Wairakei South, Tara Road and West East staging, and then industrial land, Wairakei South. So those 4 issues are really just the issues that we're focused on. Did I finally get that right?
That
Yeah,
is
so
right. Yes.
yeah, Paula, you've certainly got that right from my point. I know that there's a matter that Bill's going to want to raise later in the meeting as an additional matter, and that's something that hasn't been specifically covered in this agenda. And then there's also just some very quick advice and maybe some discussion on the correspondence which has been received from Nathan York as well. So there are those couple of additional things. But yeah, you've certainly picked the purpose of this meeting and the areas of focus of it absolutely correctly.
No, it only took 2 weeks. And as I say, thanks, Nicola and Tracy, for your help. There is just one other issue, if I can just flag it, and that's at the SmartGrowth meeting this coming Thursday, which people will have got a hernia lifting if they have a paper copy. It is extraordinary. I won't say any more at this stage, but there is the item on there about the rail Waikato tauranga. And I just wanted to be clear in my own mind the synergy or the nexus between that report and what we have decided as our recommendations on the same, I think the same issue. I might have that wrong. So that's an issue I'd also like to discuss if that was possible.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, now possibly is the time to raise that, given that you've raised it already. And Craig, you may have some views on this.
So I skim read the SmartGrowth agenda for Thursday because I can't be there and our alternate is going to be there in my stead. But I think it does have a separate report, if I'm correct, around the passenger rail connections. Is it passenger rail? I don't know. Anyway, it's to do with rail, Waikato and Bay of Plenty, and I just need to know, is that report on the same song sheet as what our recommendations are, if relevant? I was just looking at the word rail, to be honest. So I just need to have an understanding of that. Thank you.
No, I don't have that agenda in front of me at the moment, unfortunately. But yeah, I agree that it's important that there is synergy between information that's been provided to different meetings in the same time frame. Craig, have you got any advice on this, or do we need some further information about what's been referred to?
I'm not sure I'm understanding what the issue is, but there's no separate report on rail on the SLG agenda. There is a presentation on a cableway proposal that is going to be presented, but that's not happening now because the presenter's ill or injured or something. I think there's a reference to the same interregional investment strategy on that the Waikato Bay of Plenty sort of freight route, is that the issue?
Sorry, I'm trying to find my notes because Antoine Coffin gave us a verbal update and it was definitely on the... look, leave that till later and I'll go through my notes here and just try and be more specific. So my apologies. I'll look through my notes and try and get more information.
What I can say... Oh, sorry.
If it is interregional transport strategy, and you remember the map that we decided to include at the previous iteration of the Deliberations meeting, then there would be synergy and consistency between the two bits of work or between the two agendas. Craig, sorry.
Sorry, that was exactly what I was going to say.
Okay.
Same information.
Yeah. All right, so if you come up with something, Paula, that you want to raise later in this meeting, we can come back to it. Or indeed, if there's anything that your alternate wants to raise in this regard at Thursday's meeting, at the SLG meeting, we can deal with it there as well. But yeah, certainly appreciate the sentiment around wanting to make sure that there's synergy. If it is that interregional transport strategy piece, in particular that map, then yes, there is, because it's the same thing.
Cool.
Now then, I've got a hand up in the main room, John and staff at Western Bay.
Yeah, sorry about that, Andrew. It actually relates to a comment made a little while ago now, so apologies for going back. I just wanted to respond to the question that Councillor Thompson raised about the purpose of today's meeting. It is absolutely to hopefully pass resolutions in relation to those updated matters that have been flagged relating to the FDS and the industrial land IOPs. But also recommendation 3 of Craig's report also seeks you to resolve your position in relation to all of the other issues and options papers that we've already been through previously, but haven't actually passed a formal resolution. So it is essentially the whole smart growth strategy deliberations meeting, the formal part of that now.
Yeah, so essentially the new matters that we're considering today are the ones that we referred to earlier, but the resolutions capture the work that we're doing today and all of the work that was done in the previous 2 days of meetings that we had before we adjourned to today.
Mm-hmm.
Emily, thank you for that. That's great. Anything else that people want to raise in relation to Craig's report? Any questions, any comments, anything that people want to add? All right, great. So, Craig, thank you for the report and the work that sits behind it. And we'll now look at these attachments. So, Nicola, do you want to take us through the attachment 1, which is on page 6, and the matters that you address in attachment 1, which is Wairako South Tower Road and the staging of long-term developments in the eastern corridors, those matters that we referred to this meeting from the previous one.
And sorry, Nicola,
Yes.
can you just be clear about the page numbers? Sorry.
Yes, I was just going to ask if at Western Bay's end there, is it possible to share the agenda, or is that going to be hard?
Yeah. Nicola, I can bring the agenda up. I can share my screen.
Yeah, that would be good, and then we're all clear.
Sure.
And that means that we're all looking at the parts that we're focusing on at the same time. That would be really useful. Thank you.
Just around time constraints, I thought that David Fazzackley was going to present first due to having to leave the meeting at early point. Or is that, are we still...
Apologies. Yeah, David's been back in touch with us again. This is relatively new information.
Okay.
David now no longer has that time constraint.
Okay, apologies.
Bear with us. Give me 2 seconds.
Thank you. If you could go to page 31, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, I can do that.
And so the first matter we're dealing with will be Wairaki South. And just in terms of a bit of context, there has been a meeting since the deliberations on the 29th of February and the 1st of March. There's been a meeting with the general managers in order to make sure that the partnership has agreed wording. And that agreed wording, you will see that there, and was going to count the bullets, but there's sub-bullets as well. So we're probably looking at about the 4th paragraph, where it says that the Smart Growth Councils acknowledge that there is work underway by the Bell Road Partnership. And the purpose of that is just to acknowledge that there is work underway for that area, and that it will be given due consideration at that time. That will also flow through into the reasons that support our recommendation. And just to be clear, the overall recommendation itself has not changed. So, and this is the same wording that will be in David's industrial issues and options paper as well. So happy to take questions on that, Chair, if that's appropriate, or do you want me to carry on?
No, I'm happy to deal with each of these issues as we walk through them. So we'll take any questions on that now. And just to clarify, Nicola, this is wording which is agreed across all of the partners or all of the relevant partners who've had input into this. And at the officials level, at staff level, everybody's comfortable with the wording that we've got in front of us.
Yes, all the general managers that met on this issue agreed with that wording.
Excellent, thank you. All right, so are there any questions for Nicola on this particular matter?
I had one, Andrew.
Yes, go ahead, Bill, no problem.
No issue with the suggested wording per se, but, and I'm probably just looking ahead, what is then the catalyst for when that information is provided to the councils? And is there a commitment then for the partners to look at that, or is that a matter that is picked up in the implementation and funding plan? The reason I raise it, the partnership could do this work and then they provide it to the councils. What happens next, and what's the mechanism to ensure then that the Smart Growth Partnership then consider that? Or am I worrying about things I don't need to worry about at this stage?
In my view, I think it's clear in the issues and options paper that's what will occur once that information is provided, and that there is that undertaking from the partners.
Okay, no, that's fine.
All right, so you're comfortable with that? Thank you. Is there anything further that people want to raise on this matter? All right, great. So Nicola, let's move on to the next one.
Yes, the next one, if you can go to page 35, and this relates to Tara Road, and very similar wording again, and that was discussed with the general managers as well. So, yeah, pretty much identical wording as what we had in Wairaki South, just to acknowledge that if there is work undertaken and that is provided, that will be given due consideration. And happy to take questions on that one.
Yep, so just checking if there are any questions on this, realising it's the same wording that we've just looked at in relation to Wairaki South. All right, nothing there. Okay, so let's move on.
So the next one is on...
Sorry, Andrew, I did have a question, or perhaps it's indeed a clarification. And relating to Tara Road, certainly TCC has been looking at part of that area, both for potential park and ride activities and also for potential sports grounds. I'm just wanting some clarification or confirmation that because this area is currently not included as a growth area, that those two initiatives could carry on irrespective of that situation.
if we could just scroll up to the actual recommendation that's there for Tara Road, I just wanted to check that wording. So we've been quite specific that it is around residential and or business land that we're not including. So we haven't sort of put a blanket on other land uses.
I'm happy with that. I was just making sure there was that clarity.
Thank you. Anything else that people wish to raise regarding this section? All right, thank you very much. So, Nicola, let's move on.
Yes, on page 46, and this is the last issue for the FDS paper, and it relates to the east-west staging, but it was quite a confined issue around how we describe the eastern centre and also Upper Balk. And the concern was that until further work is undertaken, we didn't want to be indicating preferences at this stage. So the position that was reached was that we would put a slash instead of referring to and or using the word or. So that is the only change that's happened in there. That if you'll see that in those where we've referred to the eastern centre and western corridor, it's just represented with a slash so that we're not indicating one over the other. Happy to take questions about that one.
Thank you. Are there any questions on this? Thank you. So, Nicola, that's the last matter referred to in your report here, or your part that you're presenting here. Is there anything else that we need to look at here? Do we need to go back and look at any of the recommendations in detail?
I don't believe so. The recommendations themselves have not changed. We've added to the reasons in terms of that wording that we talked about for Wairakei South and Tara Road, but other than that, the core recommendations haven't changed.
So,
Indeed.
Nicola,
So unless there are any matters that people want to raise in relation to the information that's been presented or anything else that sits behind this, there's nothing substantive for us to do. But obviously, there's the opportunity for further discussion if there's anything to be raised.
yeah,
Paula, were you going to jump in?
Yeah, Nicola, a matter kind of arising, and we raised it through submission through our deliberations, and I haven't checked because I'd be incapable of finding it anyway. But it is the clarification around the number of households, the definitions in terms of future growth, potential future growth, and timeframes, i.e. within the FDS 0 to 30 and then beyond 30 to 50. So has all of that been tidied up?
Yes, I believe that it has. I think we have clear definitions around both those timeframes when we talk about short, medium, and long, and also what potential growth area means.
And numbers of households.
What do you mean by that one?
Well, so that the business and the whole housing analysis, where we've got 2,000 expected, 8,000, 30,000, you name it. Are we clear around those numbers now, that they are clear and consistent within the FDS up to 30 years and then beyond, particularly for Tauriko?
Yes, I believe in our strategy that we are consistent and that we've used consistent numbers throughout.
Okay, thank you.
Andrew, I just had a question again, focusing on the Western Corridor area. And I can't recall when we last met, but was just understanding what happens when or if the specified development project hits the deck, and then what is in that, and whether there is then any need to amend or to have a further discussion around what we're considering at the present time.
Just to answer that, I think we've anticipated a lot of that in a general sense by including that wider Western Corridor. In terms of further details, you know, if spatial extent changed or timing changed, or there were other areas to be brought forward, then that would need to be considered when the FDS is next reviewed within the next 3 years.
I suppose that's a long time to wait. Again, I'm speaking from an uninformed and not having any understanding of what's actually in that SDP report. So I presume, though, that if and when that hits the deck and is considered at some point, there would be nothing stopping the partners to actually doing an amendment to the strategy or the FDS, if that was considered necessary.
I'll let Craig speak to this one further. I think he's got his hand up.
My view is that you could do that, but you would need to repeat the special consultative procedure to change the FDS. Although there's also the pathway of doing development outside the FDS under Plan Change 6 of the regional policy statement. So there's two, but I think in terms of a public policy position, the pathway would be to do an amendment to the FDS through the special consultative procedure.
Thank you. Andy, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, sorry. Just trying to figure out how to start my video. I was just going to make the point that there's also the funding and implementation plan, and we can add the SDP is largely an implementation tool rather than it's not necessarily setting the strategy. We've set the strategy through here, and that is to continue to grow on the Western Corridor, and the SDP is an implementation tool to deliver that. So I think there's opportunity to include much of that and through that process.
No, thanks, Andy. And just as a suggestion, obviously to Craig and Andrew, perhaps those types of matters need to be just highlighted in the covering report that goes to SLG proposing adoption of the strategy. So I think it would be helpful for all members of SLG to understand that, and that there is that potential opportunity when the consideration of the funding and implementation plan occurs.
Yep, great. Thank you for that. Craig, we can pick that up obviously at that time in terms of your covering paper for SLG, can't we?
Yeah, I've made a note of that, so we'll pick that up there.
Yep, great. Thank you. Good discussion. Thank you. Is there anything else to be raised as regards the information that Nicola's presented in this section? All right, Nicola, thank you very much indeed for the work that you've done and the updates to the documentation and for your presentation this afternoon. Now let's move to David and the industrial land strategy issues. again relating to Belroad and Wairaki South. So we got David here.
Yes, good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, members of the hearing committee. I think Nicola's covered everything pretty well, but if we could just go to page 76, please. That's okay, Greer. So as Nicola mentioned, there was a meeting involving essentially SMG with the general managers and managers. As a result, there was one additional sentence inserted into option 3A, and that was around the Wairaki South comment. If we can just move into other considerations, please. Yes, just there, thank you. So that was the additional sentence that was agreed to amongst the SMG members, senior management, and that's been reflected in the recommended reasons as well. So just to highlight that. The other couple of minor points just to note, if we move down to page 84, please. At the last deliberations, you made an addition to include Apata alongside Omokura. And just to note that that wording said Omokura and Apata, that's been changed to a forward slash. So Apata and Omokura has been changed to Omokura / Apata. So just to note that. Sorry if we keep going down. Next page, please, sorry. Yes, just there under issue 4. So just note that we have made a change where that's now Omokura / Apata. So I just wanted to note that as well. So those are the only changes. The last matter was just in terms of option 2B, and you'll just see that there is some slight refinement above in purple text. That's to include the actual wording changes in the strategy document itself. Sorry, just pause there, yes. So it's not to replace all of what has been discussed and agreed, it's simply just to reflect the actual wording that would go into the strategy. So that was all from me, Chair.
Thank you. The purple text obviously is there for completeness. The text that you raised on page 76 reflects the same information that we've heard from Nicola, and really means that we've got consistency between chapters.
Correct.
Paula.
So /Apata actually now means that we put a ring fence around what is known as the Apata and Omokura areas, and they're all included. Is that correct?
Well, I think previously we had the word "and," which may have implied that there was going to be an area for proposed future business land at Omokura, and then potentially an area at Apata. So what's been suggested and recommended to you is that there is just one area. The purple dot is currently at Omokura, but it could be Apata. So that's something that would be further investigated down the track as and when that land is required as to the most appropriate location. The recommendation through the industrial planning study is that Omokura is that most appropriate location, but there may be other factors that come into it once a feasibility assessment is undertaken in terms of the market deliverability of land that may see that location changed.
And that reflects the discussion that we had on the 29th and the 1st.
Correct, yes.
Yeah.
If I could just add, I think that wording just allows for flexibility in where that lands at some indeterminate time in the future. So I think it's a good way of setting it out.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or messages people wish to raise on this?
I just have a clarification, Andrew, in terms of the further investigation of this area for business land or whatever. I presume that will be covered in terms of the timing and the resourcing for that further work in the implementation and funding plan. And one of the reasons I raise that is that at our last session, we inserted additional wording in the draft FDS about the opportunities for the relocation of existing industrial activities to other areas. So I just wanted to check that that can be adequately covered in that implementation and funding plan, because the need to do some of that may not wait until a certain amount of industrial land was used up or there was a particular need for further land. So I just wanted a bit of clarification around that.
Craig, are you able to assist? That was certainly my understanding.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Bill. There needs to be an action in there around getting, getting beyond the purple dots to some better understanding of spatial extent and timing and so forth. But yeah, certainly at this point, the work that David's done is completed. But yeah, we need to have a further phase, which obviously, once that's sort of drilling down to more spatial certainty on those things and then moving through to plan changes at some point. So that needs to be mapped out through the implementation and funding plan.
Yeah. Okay. No, thank you.
Thank you. Any other matters to raise here? All right, thank you very much. So David, again, no changes to your recommendations, but we've got the additional information, obviously, that you've provided here in response to those matters that were left outstanding from the meeting on the 29th and the 1st. Is there anything else that you wanted or needed to add at this point?
No, Chair. The only other point I'd make is obviously in the report were the links to those industrial reports that were prepared in the original study done by Oricon that was overseen by a project team across the SmartGrowth partnership. So that does have the level of detail that supports the recommendations made in the IOP and your decisions.
Yeah, excellent. So all of that is behind, obviously, the discussion that we're having this afternoon and the recommendations that you've made to us. Thank you. All right, so David, thanks very much indeed for the work done and for being with us this afternoon to present us. Now, there are a couple of other matters that I know people do want to raise. Bill, there was a conversation happening between yourself and staff last week regarding cross-boundary issues or where there's plan changes occurring close to boundaries, and the possibility of capturing that in some wording or otherwise in the implementation plan to make sure that that's well acknowledged. So I'll come to you to raise that issue now.
Okay, no, thanks, Andrew. Within the draft strategy, and I don't have the exact reference point in front of me, there are a couple of paragraphs that discuss the strategy providing a framework to manage growth in an integrated and collaborative way in order to address complex planning issues, especially matters that cross over council boundaries. Collaborative leadership is about recognising that the Western Bay of Plenty needs to plan together as a sub-region rather than as separate authorities and districts. And there was discussion on this matter when we last met, and I feel we need to be a wee bit more specific in terms of providing some clearer direction around that, because they're good words, but what do they actually mean? So I'm suggesting that we add to that, and then after the word districts, to that end, where there are studies or investigations or proposals by either the local governments or the private sector, then a boundaryless approach is to be taken in the development of any studies, consideration of proposals or applications to ensure that consideration is given to the most appropriate outcome in the best interests of the sub-region in the long term. So what I was suggesting is that we add that to the strategy, and certainly the feedback I've had from staff, including Nicola, is that that could be picked up in the implementation and funding plan. I acknowledge that, but I feel there just needs to be a bit more clarity in terms of the expectation and the strategy. So hence I'm suggesting, Andrew, that addition, and someone will be able to say where it will go, but believing that provides context in the strategy then for what happens next through the implementation and funding plan.
So this relates to part 5 on page 161 of the draft strategy, and relates to, I mean, this is really about the way of working in that event, the way that partners would approach a situation in that event. I know advice has been provided from staff that this can be picked up in the implementation and funding plan, but I certainly don't have any issue with adding that additional wording by way of clarification and highlighting this issue to the strategy. I don't see any harm in adding that at all, and it could actually turn out to be quite useful. So, Nicola, any additional advice on this? I know that you've given it some consideration as it's been raised, and I know that there's been work done with other staff on this as well. Any commentary or advice that you'd like to provide at this time?
No, I think that wording that Bill's provided is fine. In my view, it would probably sit under the general issues and options paper. That wording sits within, I think it's part 5, you mentioned, Andrew, and that sort of that implementation section. And I think that general IOP picked up those matters.
Yeah, so we just need to make sure it was supported properly in with an amendment to the right part of that IOP. Coming to Western Bay of Plenty.
Yeah, I think I'd just suggest, Andrew, that when you're passing your resolutions, when you get to the general IOP section, that you just add that into your resolutions in relation to the general IOP. I don't think we need to update the paper at this point in the proceedings. So it can sit in there if the rest of the panel are in agreement that they would like to include that in their resolutions.
Excellent. So is that able to be updated so that when we get there, this is included, as long as people are happy to do that?
We can do that if that's the direction that you'd like to give.
All right, let's let the discussion flow, because I'm aware that people may have views that haven't been expressed as yet. But if that's where the panel lands, then yeah, if we can pick it up in that way, that would be the right thing. But let's let the discussion flow and see where this lands from the determining the view of the panel, and then obviously that would be the way that we deal with it if it was decided to add that wording. Paula.
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to see the wording on the screen, please. And then the second issue is, has the senior management group considered this, and have they all endorsed it?
Do we have this wording in a form that can be put up on the screen?
Yes, we do. We're there with us.
Yep, no, that's good. Appreciate that. No, that's fine. Thank you. So, Paula, that's the wording there. So it's the wording in red, which is additional or proposed as additional wording. And then the next question is to what extent this has been socialised with senior staff and what level of comfort there is with it at that level. Nicola, I don't know if that's something that you're able to comment on.
As far as I'm aware, and Commissioner Wasley may be able to add to this as well, that it hasn't been to all of the senior managers. I believe that Tauranga City are obviously comfortable with that wording, but as far as I know, it hasn't been to the other partners yet.
No, and certainly I've raised it, I think, on Sunday night via email with Andy, but I haven't undertaken any particular socialisation with any of the other partners.
So if I could just comment further, at first blush, it looks fabulous. But I'd have to say my inkling would be that I'd like to know that the Western Bay Council was fully endorsing of this, and if they weren't, why not? I mean, I like the sound of it, but the devil's always in the detail. And yeah, I don't want to hold up proceedings, but this is yeah, this could be potentially quite a big issue. Personally, love it, but you know, I'm not a council, so I'd just be interested to know if there were any comments that had difficulty with it.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, my initial comment, I don't think there'd be any disagreement with the intent of this. Totally supportive of the approach of forget about artificial boundary lines and recognise physical boundaries really is the right approach. I guess the only concern is whether it forces people when a study comes forward to have a big a deep dive into something where perhaps they don't really want to go. If it's forcing people into places they don't want to go. But the intent, certainly supportive of the intent of the wording there.
Could I just add as well from Western Bay, it's Tracy Miller here. I just wanted to add that the sort of intent that this is looking for, I think, from my experience in dealing with Upper Hawere plan change staff between Tauranga City and Western Bay have been in close contact about the plan changes. So I think to some degree, at least, this is already happening. So I just wanted to add that.
All right, thank you. So, I mean, the question is whether as a panel, we would want confirmation that senior staff at Western Bay were comfortable with this before we agreed to put it in the strategy to make the changes. What we could do is pass a resolution today to do that, but make it subject to a level of comfort being expressed from Western Bay of our partner staff. We've got that from TCC already, but just making sure that we got that from Western Bay. That would mean that if Western Bay weren't comfortable with it, it would need to come back to us for further discussion. But if has been noted, Western Bay staff are likely to be comfortable with it, then it would mean that it would go through as a resolution, but only once we were comfortable or that they were comfortable with it. So just require an additional piece of work done to ensure that there was that level of comfort with senior staff in Western Bay in order for the resolution to have effect. Emily, have you got any advice on how we would handle that other than the way I've just described? What I'm trying to avoid is the need to bring the panel back together for a further meeting like this one, if we can.
Yes. Yeah, I think your approach, Andrew, saying subject to is fine. I guess my only, I just like to have a little bit more conversation internally around particularly the inclusion of the word applications. I think studies and proposals sounds more than fine, but I would just like to understand what that could mean because I know there have been some conversations around the upper Ohaiti area, and I wouldn't want to commit us to something there that the rest of the organisation has already had other conversations in relation to.
Yeah, and that would be captured by my subject to the agreement of senior staff from Western Bay of Plenty. All right, well, if you're comfortable with that as a way forward, and if the panel are comfortable with that as a way forward, that would then lead us to approve this today, subject to that level of comfort being expressed. What it would mean is that if there was anything further that needed to be discussed, so if there wasn't an expression of a level of comfort in the way that we're anticipating, it would need to come back to the panel, and depending on what was required, either for a confirmation of something slightly different than this by email, or that we would need to bring the panel back for further discussion if there was something more substantive.
I think based on the wording that's being proposed, I think we could confirm by email rather than reconvening the panel.
That's what I'm hoping. That's the spirit in which I'm approaching it. Bill, coming back to you, are you comfortable with the way this discussion is going, given this is a matter that you've raised?
Yeah, that's fine, Andrew. But yeah, I think if there was going to be changes, it's just that opportunity via email for any further comment. And I suppose one of the reasons for proposing it is that, and there was just reference earlier in terms of how staff may well be working together on some of these matters. But people come and go, governance representation comes and goes, and this is really to endure in terms of setting that direction. And it's not implying that any of that doesn't happen now, but it's important to, and that's why I like the word boundaryless planning. That is a key term in my view in terms of this additional statement, because at the end of the day, going back, and Paula will recall, I think we're the only ones there from the original. That was what SmartGrowth was predicated on. So I sometimes think that, and we forget that as a partnership.
Yeah, good comments. Thanks for that, Bill. So, I mean, I think we're moving forward in the expectation that there will be a level of comfort with this. We're really just dotting the I's and crossing the T's, so that there's an opportunity just to make sure that there is that level of comfort able to be expressed. And noting those comments there as well in his particular role at Western Bay. So as long as we're comfortable to proceed on that basis, if we can capture this, Emily, in the way that you'd suggested earlier, and obviously with that subject to wording, and just capturing the what we're dealing with the other matters from the general issues and options paper. All right, thank you. Thanks very much indeed for raising that, and thanks for the contributions to the discussion. Now, the only other matter that's come up since the meeting on the 29th and the 1st has been the correspondence that was received yesterday from Nathan York, which has been circulated to the panel. Nicola and I had a conversation about this yesterday, and I'd requested some verbal advice be provided to this meeting. There are obviously a number of matters in the letter relating to what's referred to as official information, or because this is local government, would be a Lagoya process. There are also some factual matters which are requested, which can be resolved with factual answers. The matter for the panel to consider is probably the request, or the matter for the panel to receive advice on, at least, is the matter that's raised as request E on top of page 7 of the letter. And Nicola, I'll turn to you now for some advice on the letter in general, but I guess I'm saying request E at the top of page 7 in particular. I'm just keen, if there is anything we should be dealing with here today, we do that. My view is that a lot of this will be dealt with in a reply to the letter. So responding to the matters that have been raised in the way that they've been raised. I've already gone back to Nathan earlier in the day today with an acknowledgement of the letter and noting that we will be responding in full in due course once that work has been done and the detail has been gathered.
The fact that this content hasn't been included in the agenda that we've made publicly available. So it would be my advice that we stick to the information that's in the agenda to be discussed, that's been made publicly available in advance.
All right, that's good advice, and thank you for that.
Yeah, so and that the other matters that aren't included in the agenda remain in an offline discussion.
Okay, no, that's fine. And I mean, if there was anything coming out of this discussion that required discussion in public, we would obviously need to reconvene or consider when and where we were going to do that in that public forum. Obviously, transparency and accountability are very important both to the panel and to those community members that are interested in our work. So thank you very much for that advice. And yeah, obviously we'll deal with the letter that I'm referring to by way of reply, and if there's anything that the panel do need to consider in a public forum, then we'll obviously convene a public forum in order to do that, or do it in an existing forum. Nicola, was there anything in terms of the matters in the issues and options papers that are in the public arena that needs to have our attention drawn to it in this regard, or are you comfortable that we respond to the letter as a piece of correspondence rather than it needing to be raised in this meeting?
I agree with your latter point there, that that the letter can be dealt with. I just point out that both the FDS and the industrial issues and options papers have canvassed several options for the area in question, and they've been analysed and advantages and disadvantages considered. And so even a couple of those points that were made in that letter have already been covered in those papers.
Indeed, thank you. All right, so we'll deal with this as a piece of correspondence to be responded to outside of this meeting, and that's fine. Thank you very much, Kate. Thank you. All right, so that now leaves us coming back to the recommendations in Craig's paper, and back to the discussion about those recommendations as Craig presented them in the early part of the meeting. That's assuming that there isn't anything else that anybody wants to raise before we do that. And I'm just checking that we've covered everything that people wanted to raise in this meeting, given now that we're moving to the recommendations that will result in the recommendations to the SLG meeting on the 23rd of April, and that close out the work that we've done now across the 3 days of these deliberations meetings. All right, so nothing people want to raise, that's good. So now let's move to the recommendations as they are in front of us. So if we just step through these, received the report from the Strategic Advisor, which is the report that Craig presented at the beginning of the meeting, receives the issues and options papers prepared by topic leaders attachment 1 and 2. So those are the ones that Nicola and David spoke to respectively in the context of the matters that were specifically referred to this meeting. And then recommendation 5, attachment 5, sorry, is the other IOPs relating to the matters that we considered at the previous meeting. So they're on page 116 of this agenda, and the matter that Emily drew our attention to earlier in this meeting. And then we've got recommendation 3, the changes in accordance with the schedule in attachment 4. So they're all changes that reflect the discussions that we've had over the 3 days of deliberations. And then we've got the Part 5161 of the strategy, of the draft strategy amendment, which is the one that we discussed in relation to the matter that Bill raised. And I've got the wording that talks about, subject to a level of comfort being confirmed from Western Bay Council. So that's there, that's fine. Noting the schedule of actions in attachment 3 for consideration in the development of the draft implementation funding plan. So there have been a number of matters as we've gone through this work that we have referred to the draft implementation and funding plan for consideration there, rather than that resulted in changes to the strategy. So that picks up those. Resolution 5 is the report that relates to the report that Craig is going to prepare for the SLG meeting on the 23rd of April. And then resolution 6 is the matter that was raised earlier in this meeting today, relating to the factual editorial changes and minor updates. That includes the matters that were referred to in terms of the chair's forward and the executive summary, and provides me as the independent chair with a delegation to sign off on those, regarding realizing that they're all editorial changes and minor updates rather than anything substantive that would require the specific agreement of the panel. So are there any questions or issues that are to be raised relating to the wording or the form of these resolutions? No questions, that's good. So people are comfortable with the resolutions. Given that one of them provides a delegation to me, it would be good if there was a mover and a seconder, neither of whom were me. So if I can have a mover for the resolutions, please. So Bill, you're happy to move?
Happy to move.
And a seconder?
Can you just confirm that those are resolutions 1 to 6 that you're moving all at once? Sorry, Andrew, I know you have talked about that, but I just want to make it clear.
That's all right. So, yeah, I'm intending putting all of these resolutions together as a block, realizing that each one of them is an individual resolution that deals with a particular matter. But yeah, rather than moving and seconding each of them individually, I'm certainly keen that we move them as a block, unless there's any one resolution that somebody's not happy with and wants us to take individually, so that they could, for example, vote against it. I'm hoping that's not going to happen.
So you've got a mover and Bill Wesley.
Yeah.
So Bill is happy to move. Do I have a seconder?
Matiri Duncan. Yep.
Oh,
Matiri, happy to second. Thank you very much. So is there any discussion on these resolutions? I'll put the resolutions. All those in favour say aye.
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 Against? That's carried. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. And that concludes the business of the meeting. So we're now closing the meeting that we opened on
just before you do that, Andrew.
Yeah, sure.
When we last met, there was a discussion around the panel receiving an amended copy before it went on to the Smart Growth Leadership Agenda, really just because we've looked at various bits of it, but it was really just to have an overall look of how it all fitted together. So I didn't see any need as being part of the resolution, but I would find that helpful personally anyhow.
Yeah, and I mean, that was something we discussed in the previous 2 days of meetings. I see no reason why that shouldn't be able to occur. We've also had discussions to make sure that that agenda is provided, and I forget what the date was that we agreed, but well in advance of that SLG meeting, to allow for discussions to occur between panel representatives of partner organisations within partner organisations, so that if there are issues that are raised, there's plenty of time to discuss those and to resolve any matters that may arise before we get to the SLG meeting itself on the 23rd of April. And that should hopefully lead us to a position where SLG partner representatives are able to attend that meeting confidently, knowing that they've got the support of their organisations behind the position that they'll be taking at that meeting on that day. So yeah, thanks for raising that, Bill. That was certainly something that was discussed from a number of different viewpoints at the previous couple of days of this meeting, and we remain committed to providing information well in advance so that everything is able to be well considered and so on before the decision-making meeting on the 23rd. Thank you. All right, so we're now closing the meeting that we opened on the 29th of February. Now, Tapio opened this meeting with a karakia on that day. I'm just looking at my screen. Is Tapio here with us today to close this meeting with a karakia as he opened it? Or maybe Matilo, that's something I could request to do.
I can do that. I don't see Tapio's name up there. So I'm happy to close our hui off from the last few sessions that we've had. Me noi tātou, kia hora te marino, kia whakapapapona me te moana, hei huarahi mā tātou I te rangi nei, aroha atu, aroha mai, tātou ia, tātou katoa. Āmene. Kia ora.
Kia ora, thank you very much. Kia ora, everyone. Thanks very much indeed for your attendance and participation.